also the church is using state for some business. For example, we had, I think, last summer that army was helping to put one church on the top of the mountain using government resources, and also sometimes you have like signature of the church, which was for me the most conspicuous when was Dayton Agreement. On that Dayton Agreement, Patriarch Pavle, who is the boss of Serbian Church, he also put a sign on that agreement, you know, and so you have overlapping in some important stuff. On the other hand, I also noticed that the state is also using church. Last time, the good example was that when government organized big demonstrations against independence of Kosovo, and invited a lot of people. I think it was 500,000 people in front of Federal Assembly. That after that there was a we called it Moleban, collective praying for Kosovo, and all government was in the church. And I thought that it was somehow using church to cover what was actually planned disorder, what was going on in Belgrade. So sometimes you see connected the top of the government and the top of the church. So they collaborate in certain events, and they both know what is going on. But that comes recently more from the party which was in the government. This party is called Democratic Party of Serbia, and President and Prime Minister, still Prime Minister, is Vojislav Koštunica, and he's very clerically oriented, and so that connection between church and government is more pronounced during his government. And then also you have very often that politicians or statesmen who are engaged in the government, they go to the church and ask to be received by Patriarch Pavle for advices, for consultations, and so on. I can find something also which is conspicuous is also that we have like Slava of Belgrade city. Belgrade's government, city of Belgrade, is a completely secular institution, and I don't know why we have a Saint Slava that they give a big reception when that saint is in question. So you see that, and sometimes also the premises of municipalities are also somehow, I don't know how to say that in English, like done something against maybe some wrong forces, supernatural forces. So you can see this mixture between church and government on local level or national level. But people usually don't protest against that, and they accept that as normal. But we don't like that, interfering in politics, church. And sometimes, as I say, it's not only church interfering in the government, but also government interfering in church. For example, now we have to probably, Patriarch Pavle, he's very old, he's going to be replaced when he dies. And I'm sure that the government is doing a lot of underneath work, you know, who is going to be the one after his death. So probably there is some, how to say, connections, sometimes more visible, sometimes less visible, but connections are present. But generally speaking, you know, under our constitution, we have secular state.
So you were discussing the involvement of politicians and political groups in this increasing clericalization of the state and decreasing secularism. Could you talk a little bit more about the political forces, the players, the groups that have been involved in this in the last 10 years or so, and what they have done to change the nature of secularism in Serbia?
Well, I think that the problem is, you know, what is the origin of mixture of church and government. is because we have like a state church. This is a Serbian Orthodox church. In Orthodoxies in all these countries which are Orthodox, they have their own church. So in a way it is natural, because you have of your own people their own church, of the nation church. And that's I see the origin of that interfering of church into state and vice versa. There is in our history when we are under Turks that actually Serbian nation survived because of that Orthodox identity, and church in history played a big role, as they say, about saving Serbs as a nation. And that overlapping, you know, because it's a Serbian national church, that church also feels that it should interfere in national problems and in national things. Like, for example, when we had our not Christmas, but Easter Day, one of the very high bishop, Amfilohije, he would greet people on behalf of the church, but at the same time he would also say a lot of things about Kosovo, and messages like who is going to betray Kosovo. So this is somehow comes from history of Serbia, and, you know, overlapping of the state and nation actually, and the church is a part of the nation. So that's why they usually interfere in national questions. During the war, church had very important role, and they even went around and said where are the graves of Serbs, and where are the sands of Serbs around, and they went all around in a way denoting where are actually Serbian borders. So I mean that history of interconnected of Serbian nation and their church is the cause of the situation that we still have now, and people are not protesting because the church is part of the Serbian national identity. It's very difficult to say that you are not religious because they think you're not Orthodox, that you're not, if you're not Orthodox, you're not belonging to the Serbian, if you don't belong to the Serbian Orthodox Church, you're not Serb by nationality. So if you're, for example, Serb by nationality, who would convert and take some of our Protestant groups like Pentecost or Jehovah's Witnesses, they would not treat you as Serb anymore because you changed your religion. So that identity of Orthodox Church and Serbdom is connected through the history and is still so. I don't know whether that was your question, you know, but...
No, I think you went back even further than kind of explain the origin, so that was really helpful. And a final question is, how is this decreased secularism, the increased clericalization of Serbian society affecting women specifically, and what are they doing in response? What are women doing in response to this change in the secular nature of society?
Well, most of the time we can notice that the church is interfering in giving birth to children, and they will because Serbia has a negative growth of population, and church is taking care why we don't have more Serbs, and making pressure on women that should give birth to more Serbs, and sometimes like we are going to disappear if the women if women are not giving more birth, and in a way to serve to the nation, giving more birth. But that didn't have much effect on behavior of women, because that rate is not changing positively but negatively.
Okay.
My name is Biljana Stojkovic. I'm an evolutionary biologist. I'm assistant professor at the Faculty of Biology, University of Belgrade, Department for Genetics and Evolution.
Wonderful. So the first question is your country secular, and what does that mean to you?
Formally, Serbia is a secular country. That is written in our constitution. So legally, we are secular values are winning in our society, but I think that reality is quite different, and that we are witnessing that we are losing secular values in our society. There are many things that just lead us to conclude something like that. Many things, and my major concern is religious influence on education, because I think that education is really important for the development of one society, because it just has a long-term effect. And I think that if you want to analyze the direction that one society is developing toward, I think that you must analyze the education politics. It is really important. And we are witnessing really bad things that are happening, and we can say that direction is clinicalization. Mm-hmm. And there are many events that can lead us to that conclusion.
And as a scientist, why is secularism important in education?
Secularism is really important because I think that secular values are deeply related to a scientific way of thinking. Because if you are teaching children to have a scientific way of thinking, that means that you are teaching them, you motivate them to be individuals, to be critical, to be skeptic, not to appreciate any authority. In the science, you have to deserve to be authority, and authority is always questionable. So that is really important, and that is one thing. But the other thing is that when you have that kind of thinking about the world around you, that means that you understand how diversity emerges and how diversity evolves, and that is something that is really important. You just realize that diversity is a natural phenomenon, and that you don't have to be afraid of diversity. That is something that has to be appreciated, it has to be acknowledged. So that is really important, and that is the basic thing that can make one person tolerant and human.
Have there been changes in the past 10 years or so on secularism in Serbia, and what are the political forces that you identify behind these changes?
Always, political forces, those right-wing political forces, political parties, are alleged with or alleged to those religious extremism. So that is something that always goes parallel. Political right forces, extremism in political way, and extremism in religious way. And we have these tendencies in our politics. We have those political parties that are now extremely religious. They have those tendencies in their political programs, and that is Democratic Party of Serbia and Radical Party. And I think that every part of their program is actually clerical, and we can see this tendency. Unfortunately, they are elected politicians, so they decide what is the course of our society for the last 4 years, and maybe longer. And education, I mentioned education, and that is a really important thing. That is the Ministry of Education is under influence of Democratic Party of Serbia. And there are many influences that just showed us that actually they are trying to put our country in that in that direction. For example, in 2004, the Ministry of Science, Biljana Stojkovic, was forced to resign after she ordered schools not to teach evolution in schools, or to teach creationism ideas in their school curricula, not just in school curricula, but on the classes of science. And that was really important, and scientists and non-government institutions were really important for this resignation, so she was forced to resign. But after she resigned, other ministers that were also the members of the Democratic Party of Serbia, they just were doing the same thing. Not just obvious, not that obvious, but we can see that the direction is the same.
And how does this affect women? And what action are women taking to combat this?
When you compare religious, theocratic values and secular values, the difference is pretty clear. In secular values, that means, just as I explained earlier, that secular values are actually appreciation of diversity, and that every human life is important, regardless of ethnicity, religion, or sexual orientation, or anything. So I can be atheist, I can be a believer in whatever the God I want to believe, or anything else. So, but I have to be appreciated. When you analyze religions, every religion, each religion has the same values. There are moral rules, how you have to behave, in whom you may be in love, who to love, who to hate, in what way you have to be dressed, what food you can eat, etc. There are many rules. So when you live in those rules, you cannot be free. And so if you have the clericalization tendencies toward clericalization, it is clear there are no human rights, or human rights are threatened. And that means the women's rights are also threatened. The religions just appreciate those traditional roles, gender roles, and we all know what that means. In Serbia, sadly, but most of women just agrees with that. Biology tells us that there is no really difference between intellect of the woman and the man. And who knows how many excellent minds were lost just because they were within a woman's body. But that is really sad.
Anything else? Yeah, anything else you'd like to add, or?
I don't know, maybe you asked me something.
What do you think that women in Serbia can do or are doing to combat this clericalization of society? And as a scientist, how do you combat it?
As a scientist, I don't have many problems as a woman, because that is a small community, scientific community, and I personally don't have